Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Leslie Torres Rodriguez. I'm the superintendent of Harvard Public Schools. And I want to thank you so much for making time to join us today or listening to the recording on our website if you are joining us later. I do appreciate your partnership. And I am pleased to be sharing with you today that we are revising our 3-year operating plan that is aligned to our district model of excellence, our DME. And we're asking for your feedback as we develop that plan. It is important to us that we have your input early in our planning process so that it's reflected in our final plans and ultimately in some of the federal funding applications that we have in the next couple of weeks and then in future weeks ahead. And I do want to thank you also for not only your patience, but your understanding, given that we have all been through the toughest 13 months in education in the last 100 years. And so I know that looking ahead to next year or 3 years ahead can be difficult when many of us are still so very focused on what's happening right now, what's happening tomorrow, where's this pandemic, when is it going to end? But as a district, we do have to plan ahead. One, to meet funding application deadlines, but also because we do want to be prepared for the future. Para los que están con nosotros y necesitan escuchar en el canal de audio de interpretación, que sí tenemos en español, puede hacer clic en el enlace de Zoom que se le envió por correo electrónico y vamos a utilizar la función de interpretación de Zoom para proporcionar la interpretación en español en este seminario web. Y cuando ingrese al seminario web de Zoom, mire hacia el lado derecho de la barra de menú en la parte inferior de la pantalla y ahí puede hacer clic en el botón que contiene la imagen, como ven aquí, de un globo y seleccione español para poder escuchar la traducción. Y también puede volver a hacer clic en el icono del globo y seleccionar Mute Original Audio Channel si es que no desea escuchar el audio en inglés en absoluto. Así que bienvenidos a todos si están con nosotros y por favor haga clic en el Zoom para que pueda escuchar la traducción en español. So here's what we're going to cover in the next hour. First, I'm going to give a short presentation on the 3-year strategic operating plan and the goals. And then we're going to hear from you about what your dreams are for our Hartford students, what they need and what you see the district needs to do to make those dreams a reality. And then finally, we will close with sharing some next steps. And we do have a webinar format today so that we can accommodate a larger number of attendees. And so we found some fun ways, the team has found some fun ways to make the time engaging and hear directly from you. So we're going to dive in. So the district model of excellence for excellence, the DME, as many of us like to call it, is the vision for the district that we set together actually back in 2017. It names what we care most about as a district and as a community and the priority areas that we focus on: teaching and learning, family and community partnerships, school culture and climate, and operational effectiveness. These 4 priorities working together help ensure that we meet the needs of the whole student, because we know that students have academic, social, and emotional needs as well. And it was back in 2017, 2018 that we did partner with families and staff and others in our community over several months to develop the DME. Some of you might recall, I recall attending over 100 engagement and feedback sessions, asking what mattered to you and how we could better serve our students. And we used that feedback to build the DME. And then in the summer of 2018, we developed the 3-year strategic operating plan to guide how we focused our time, our attention, and our resources. And so here we are 3 years after, and we want to update our strategic operating plan to guide us over the next 3 years. And the plan will continue to be grounded in our DME, and we will remain committed to the priorities and the values that our community has told us matter. Those are not going to change. The strategic plan gets into the details of what it is that we aim to do to bring the DME into reality. So it's going to include a set of key steps or actions for our leaders to follow and implement across the district over the next 3 years. And in addition to our existing budget, which the Board of Education already approved in February, this strategic plan will also guide us on how we think about spending the COVID relief funds that we are going to receive from the federal, the state and federal government. We know that we have applications that we have to complete, submit, and then, the state will determine whether or not what it is that we're saying we're going to do, the state is going to approve. So hearing from you and from our community is a critical component for us as we develop the plan. Conversations about the plan have already started, and they're going to continue over the next couple of weeks. And we'll ask our families, our staff, our community organizations to share reactions to the plan. And our community listening tour clearly will not be as intense as it was in the DME development process back in 2017. And that, as we all know, is in part because we're operating through a pandemic, and we are moving quickly to prepare ourselves for the next phase of the work. And we also want to make sure that we honor what we learned from our community through the hard work that we have already done in building the DME, right? We know that there are things that our community said to us 3-4 years ago, and those priorities are not going to change. And we also know what we believe and care about mostly has to remain the same. We are, however, going to evolve the work and the goals to achieve that vision over the next 3 years. And so far, we have learned from the fall learning experience survey that we sent out, discussions with our school leaders, our union representatives, our staff. We have looked at student learning data and the research to understand students' current and even the projected needs that students are going to have. And we also learned from understanding what expert research tells us is most likely to have a positive impact on addressing our student and our staff needs. And as we started updating the plan, it was important that we understand the main benefit we want to have for our students. And to do that, we have to understand where exactly are we right now? Where do things stand right now? And we know that we have our staff, everyone, parents, our families, our partners, we've been working hard to support students through the pandemic. And we still know that this is still a very difficult time for them. And based on today's attendance, for example, and on the learning data, we do expect that students are going to need extensive support next year, especially our students that have a higher level of need. And not just here in Hartford Public Schools or in Connecticut, but across the nation, the loss of learning has been largest in schools that serve mostly students of color, perhaps up to twice as much. And it's very concerning in math, especially in math, where researchers believe students of color may have lost as much as 3 to 5 months of learning in math, compared, for example, as you can see here, compared to white students who may have lost just 1 to 3 months. The analysis also shows that if we do not take serious action, our students of color could lose 6 to 12 months of learning on average by the end of the year. So this is an example of why over the next 3 years, we have to be so laser focused on supporting our students' academic, social, and emotional needs. And we have to double down. We have to double down on supporting our staff and our families so that they can also better support our students. And we're going to be guided by 4 major goals to help everyone achieve their full potential. And we're going to review those goals now. The first goal that we are going to set is increasing our 4-year cohort graduation rates, which is an essential step for preparing our students for success in college, in career, and in life. And last year, our 4-year cohort graduation rate was just under 73%. And we have not received yet the final cohort graduation rate. But we are looking ahead. We're looking ahead to the next several years, and we're going to aim to increase that to at least 83% of our students graduating within 4 years by the end of 2024. The second goal that we are setting, and this is one that you've heard me speak about before, it's our 3rd grade reading proficiency, because research and our own experience shows that early literacy is a key for long-term student success. 3rd grade reading is especially important because it's that critical time when students go from learning to read, for example, decoding using words, and their knowledge of the alphabet, for example, shifting that to reading to learn, right? Reading, absorbing, and using the information in the text. And so that's a critical time for us and for our students. And 2 years ago, as you can see on this graphic here on this slide, in 2018-19, about a quarter of our 3rd graders met reading proficiency as measured by the state's end-of-year SBAC test. Our goal is to increase that by 4.4% each year, so that by the end of 2024, more than 48% of our 3rd graders are proficient readers. And I'll also want to mention that, typical what's an expected increase is about a 2 to 2.5% increase a year. However, we are going to aim higher than that. We're going to aim for 4.4% increase every year. We have our 3rd goal, and that is 8th grade math proficiency, because we know that that is a critical transition point, right? 8th grade into 9th grade. And it's a critical point into high school math. And we also know that math is where many of our students struggle the most in remote and hybrid learning. And 2 years ago, you see here that about 15% of our 8th graders met math proficiency as measured by the end-of-year state SBAC test. And over the next several years, our goal is to increase that percent every year by 4.9%. And that's a little more aggressive than the literacy goal that I just reviewed. And we want by the end of 2024 to have at least 46% of our 8th graders being proficient in math. And our 4th major goal will be to reduce chronic absenteeism, to ensure that more students are in school and engaged. We know that students are chronically absent if they miss 10 or more % of the days of the school year. And we know that this is an area of focus for us, even before the pandemic. We ended last school year with 28% of our students chronically absent, and that actually increased from where we were right before we had to shut the school system down because of the pandemic. We were actually closer to 24%. And so we ended the year with a 28%. And not only in Hartford, but across the country, attendance has been especially difficult during the pandemic, with remote learning, also because of competing priorities outside of school, and other factors that we know impact our students and our families. And we've seen chronic absenteeism rise to nearly 45% this year. And we're working hard, our schools, everyone is working hard to keep students engaged and have students, show up either in person or virtually. And we're going to continue to try to decrease our chronic absenteeism for the remainder of the year. But we know that this is an area that we have to also double down in. And so our aim is to reduce chronic absenteeism rates every year by 1.3%, so that at the end of 2024, we have fewer than 13% of students that are chronically absent. That is also a very aggressive goal that we are setting for ourselves. So I am, we're having different engagements with a variety of groups, and I have another session with students tomorrow to learn about their needs and their aspirations. But we've already heard from some of our students about what they're thinking and what their needs are, and I just wanted to give you a few examples here. Students letting us know that they need extra help in school to catch up so that they can graduate on time. Creating more emotional and mental support due to COVID, getting the education that I need, that the student needs, so that he, she, or they are successful in college, and then to be understanding of a child's situation out of school, and to not give up on a student, and to focus more on math skills. So lots here from our students. As I mentioned, the goals that we're setting are ambitious. However, with the right set of collective action and targeted resources, we believe we can achieve them over the next 3 years. Our priorities and vision will guide us over the next 3 years in achieving our goals. And as I mentioned earlier, our 4 priorities remain the priorities that were called out in the DME. And we've added descriptions to those priorities, and we've even added a vision statement to each, so that it can help us describe the excellence that we're aiming for. So you have, for example, here, high quality teaching and learning. And that's our vision, that is to prepare students not only academically, but also leading to life, college, and career success, right? We want to take bold action to understand, but also to meet student needs in academic recovery and acceleration. Welcoming culture and climate. Our vision there is to cultivate a learning environment that is inclusive, innovative, collaborative and engaging, by ensuring that our buildings are safe and engaging learning environments. And our second 2 priorities are engaging family and community partnerships. And the vision is to extend student learning opportunities through partnerships between school, home, and the community through engaged family and community partnerships. And finally, our 4th priority is skillful staff and effective operations, with a vision to attract, develop, and retain highly qualified employees, so that we can continue to improve not only student, school, but district performance as well. And under each of the DME priorities, we do have a set of strategies that we're going to implement over the next 3 years. Here are some of the examples of what that work might look like for students and families over the next year. So I'll highlight, some examples here, under teaching, high quality teaching and learning, right? Some of the strategies include targeted supports to meet all of our students' academic, social, emotional, and extracurricular needs, and more support for students transitioning into high school and then into college and career. We have, as you can see, different strategies under each of the priorities. And then the next level of work is for us to continue to hear from you about what it is that matters most to you, to your students, and how is it that we as a district can support that as we continue to update our plans. So that was a review of where we were with the initial district model of excellence, the reason why we think it's important for us to update our plan, the urgency that exists for us, the goals that we're setting, and then of course the vision for each of the priorities and some of the strategies. And I'll now turn it over to Nichette Blackpark.
Thank you, Superintendent, and hello again to everyone. And thank you for joining us this evening. And so at this time, we are going to take some time to actually engage with each other and go through an exercise here with PeerDeck. So as I shared, I'm the Chief of Family and Community Partnerships, and we've discussed the district model of excellence. Thank you to the superintendent for walking through that. And we want to interact with all of you to hear how you feel it connects to your student. So we're going to be using PeerDeck, and this is a tool that is used across the country in the remote and in-person teaching environment. So what's great about PeerDeck is that it allows us to communicate directly with you, even though we're all in different spaces. So first, let me go through the directions, and then we're going to launch the PeerDeck. So you can join by typing joinpd.com in your smartphone or your computer browser. Then type in the 6-digit code that's in the top right. And then we'll be able to interact with each other. So type in joinpd.com, enter that 6-digit code, and then we'll be able to interact. Now, there are 3 different options for engaging with the PeerDeck so that we can interact with each other. Option 1 is to keep your Zoom up on your computer. Sign into PeerDeck on your smartphone. This is an option that I like best because you can have the session up on your screen and then interact with the questions. Option 2 is to keep your Zoom on your computer and then sign into the PeerDeck in a new window on your computer. And option 3 is, if you opt not to use the PeerDeck at all, you can also use the the question and answer function, or put that into the chat. So decide on what option you're going to use. And now we're going to show the code on the screen for you to input that into your browser. And it looks like we have 23 folks already connected. That's great. And if for any reason that you need the code again, it's in the top right corner of the Zoom screen. Okay, so we're up to 26. That's great. Okay, so let's get started with our first question. So I want you to take a moment, close your eyes, and imagine your child's future. What do you picture that they leave our schools knowing and being able to do? I'll say that again. Close your eyes and imagine your child's future. What do you picture that they leave our schools knowing and being able to do? so you can feel free to draw or write it. You should see a green answer question button. You can click on that, and then you'll be able to answer the question. You can also draw or type anything that you'd like to answer. Remember that there is not a submit button. So we'd love to see some results that are coming in. All right, we see math, spelling,
Chief Blackburk, there's a in the chat that someone does not see the PeerDeck code. So just want to flag that for us.
Thank you, Superintendent. The code for the PeerDeck, and thank you so much. There it is. P like Paul or purple, NN, ninjas neatly, C, conduct, J for juicy, Y, yards. That is the code for the PeerDeck. Thank you, Superintendent. All right, self-care, math, spelling. Being a leader. Culturally diverse and knowledgeable. Being self-reliant. Loving the artwork. The crown on top of the student's head. Thank you so much for your responses. We are going to move to the next question. So thinking of your hopes and dreams for your student, what do we need to do to make that possible for your student? Please write your response by pressing the green answer question button. Again, thinking of your hopes and dreams for your student, what do we need to do to make that possible for your student? Please write your responses by pressing the green answer question button. Smaller class sizes, authentic experiences to increase their background knowledge, confidence, creativity, motivation. We need to have access to materials, collaborative spaces, qualified and caring teachers, holding students accountable for their learning, preparing them for college success, opportunities for student choice and voice, opportunities for them to succeed and feel proud of themselves, physical resources, teachers, the arts, music, paper, high expectations, teachers, parents, and students who are ready to achieve success. Thank you. I wasn't able to read all of the responses, but wanted to read some of them. Thank you for your responses. So now that we've had a moment to look at the PeerDeck, answer some of these questions, we will open it up for a few minutes of clarifying questions from you before we then ask you for your feedback on this emerging set of work. And so I do see that there are questions in both the Q&A function and the chat. And so while those are being pulled together, I will continue.
So yes, we have a few questions, and so the first one is related to at the beginning of the presentation, Superintendent, you were talking about, our chronic absenteeism, and unfortunately how basically immediately when the pandemic started, we saw that it started increasing, unfortunately. And this one is not so much a question as much as a comment. It says students are also being marked absent due to internet capacity issues. Would you like to comment a little bit more on that?
Yeah, this is agreement. I'm in agreement with that. Not only the ability to connect, but we also know that, some students, especially some students that are, were new arrivals and were learning English as their second language, found it specifically challenging at the beginning of the year. And so we're aware of all of those. And, we know that our schools were working with our families to the best extent possible to try to understand what those challenges were. We have tried to do the best that we can to get technology out to families, the hotspots, and still we know that for some of our families, that's also a challenge, which is why it's important for us to continue to offer the option for families to have students in person to the extent possible. So we're going to continue to do that. But we know that it has been a very challenging year, and the connectivity, is one thing that we continue to hear months after months after months. It has gotten better, but we know it was a rough start at the beginning.
Thank you. And for now, I just want to let everybody know I'm going to ask another question, and then we will get to the rest of them at the end. So the next question is related to, you mentioned that tomorrow, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that it's tomorrow that you will be meeting with the students to discuss the district plan. So the question is, how do you determine what students, to us, how do you get to this particular group of students that you're going to be discussing, not necessarily asking, but like discussing, having a conversation with them about our plan?
That's a great question. And I know that the team is also looking to see how we can get questions to all students, even though if students, some of our students might not want to respond, but we want to give all students an opportunity to respond. I do know that tomorrow, the group that I'm meeting with tomorrow is our student leaders, some of our leaders, especially across our middle schools. Is that accurate, Ms. Chief Blackburk?
Thank you, Superintendent. So the piece tomorrow with the students is with student leaders, but of course we have been collecting student voice in many different ways through surveys and also just hearing directly from students through their teachers.
Thank you. So we'll go back to the presentation, and then towards the end, we'll go back to the questions. We have some very interesting ones.
Thank you so much, Ms. Alvarado. So we've heard a couple of questions related to the presentation that was shared by our superintendent. We've had some time to think further through the questions that were presented on the PeerDeck. And so just want to wrap up this section with this. So having the hopes you just described in mind, and as you answer a survey that we want to share with you, hoping that you will use that as you are thinking about how you are going to respond and looking at, is this plan putting the district on a path to meet your vision? We will update our plans based on your input from the survey and also from the rest of the HPS community to ensure that we work and plan together to meet student, staff, and family needs. So the link, if you are on the PeerDeck, you'll be able to see that link, and I believe that we will also be putting it in the chat, but you will also have an opportunity to take that short survey to give feedback on our draft 3-year plan. So please take a few moments to complete it now. For the people who are using PeerDeck, You have it linked and you can complete it. And again, you'll be able to access the survey through that function. So just want to give a few moments for folks to be able to look at the survey. And now we'll continue with the questions that were in our Zoom webinar feature. Ms. Alvarado?
All right. So are the student outcome goals over the course of 3 years, or are these goals that you presented each year? I know you were talking about the percentages and how we, as a district, are go-getters, and that, you know, the average is something. So maybe parents are having a little difficulty understanding, is this 9% yearly, or is this like a 3% each year, or how do we get to that?
That's a great question. And if we could go back to on the slide deck, we can say, let's go to slide 7. So what we try to do here is to show 4-year, over 4 years. So we have our target is, right, to go from 73 to 83 in 4, over from now until 2024. And so we'll kind of chunk that out over the years. Now, of course, if we are able to identify the supports and have a 5% increase, that's great. But we want to make sure that we, identify incremental growth over the years, with the end, by 2024 being 83%. If we go to the next slide, just to give an example. Right, so in here, when we talk about the 3rd grade, ultimately what we want to do is we want to target to have 4.4% every year. And when we add all of those together, ideally what we're saying is that we want to go up to, from where we are now, right? We were 22, if you see 2018-19, 22.2%. We want to continue to incrementally grow so that by the end of 2023-24, we are at 48.8%. Now, I know this wasn't a question, but I do want to clarify that these are for the entire district, right? So every school, what gets to happen over the next couple of months is every school then is going to have their goals. We have our district goals. These are the major goals that we're going to share with everyone. But then each school also has to identify their goals, right? We're going to say, what does each school have to do based on what their students need in order to improve every single year to get us to a specific place by 2024. So at the district level, there are goals. At the school level, there are goals. In the classroom, there will be goals. The individual student will have their goals. And this is what we're working on to try to build so that we can, align it and everyone is working toward the same thing.
Thank you. And I would just like to take this opportunity, now that we're talking about schools having goals, and I want to thank everybody who is here, but also tell your fellow parents that this is why we need that involvement, because the school goals, we need to know as parents, right? And, involving yourself, maybe not at SGC or PTO, but definitely having communication will help the school, shape those goals so that we can get there. Another question related to the goals is how are you measuring the outcomes, and how will this be shared with families?
Yes, so in terms of measuring the outcomes, we are, so SBAC is an annual test at the state that we are required to administer, even this year in the middle of a pandemic, right? The state is expecting us to administer the test. And so, we are going to communicate that as a district to the entire community, and then our schools are going to also communicate that. We are working, actually, our Board of Education invested in a platform that is going to allow us to develop reports, data reports, user-friendly reports that we're going to make visible for the entire community at the school, at a school level, and also at the district level as well.
You can put it into me as a panelist. I'll put it in the chat.
Thank you, Superintendent.
Wait, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think I don't know if I answered the first half of the question.
Okay.
About
the sharing.
measuring. So that was about the sharing.
Yes.
Measuring. So the SBAC, we are in alignment with the accountability measures that the state has for us. I don't know if those measures are going to change. But we do, in addition to these 4 major goals, we have a list of measures, outcome measures that we have to also continue to pay attention to as per the requirement of the state's accountability index. And so for this goal, for example, the literacy goal, we have proficiency. And what that means is ensuring that we look at a grade level, right? Are our students at grade level? Now, we know that some students, are at different places in their learning, which is why we want to provide those additional supports. And we also know that we look at SBAC, for example, in terms of growth, because not all students enter our district at the same time, with the same experiences, with the same background. And so we also look at the growth that students do in a specific academic year. So while I reviewed the 4 major goals, there are also other goals that we also are going to have to pay attention to. But these are the major goals. These are the goals that we're saying, okay, these matter significantly, because, as I said, right, 3rd grade reading is foundation, and we need that for students to continue to be successful as they progress. 8th grade math, because as they transition to high school, math is really important, and we want to make sure that our students have a solid foundation as they get ready to, either go to college or go to career. And chronic absenteeism, that's something actually that we have heard a lot in the feedback from the teacher surveys. Students have to be in school and engaged so that they can have access to the learning. And of course, graduation, because ultimately that's almost like the end point for us here in K-12, right? When students are able to graduate, and we want our students to do that in 4 years, because when students are not on track to graduate in the 4 years, that puts them at risk of either not finishing, getting discouraged, or potentially wanting to drop out. So we want to do the most that we can to keep them on track. That was a very long explanation, more than the question asked me, but I wanted to also offer, all the other pieces that connect to that.
Thank you. We have, now I'm moving to the chat, because we have different avenues. So we have a question that it talks about involvement. So it's what kind of involvement or assistance or anything would you like to see from parents, guardians to help meet the goals you specified in this presentation?
Well, I can start, and Chief Blackburn can add. I know that from the surveys that we received, especially the fall survey, I forget how many thousands of responses we had from our families. We continue to hear that families, they wanted additional training. Specifically, they wanted to hear and learn from teachers and from our curriculum staff about, what do you mean by literacy? What do you mean by, numeracy and math, and what are standards, and how can we support? So we know that we have to continue to do that, because that's something that our families, continue to request. We know that as we think about social and emotional needs, and, the level of support that our students are going to need post pandemic. We also know that we want to support families with that. Those are just some of the examples. But the most important thing is that we want to ensure that our schools are developing those partnerships with our families. So Chief Blackburk, anything else that you would like to add?
Thank you, Superintendent. The only thing that I would add is that, yes, we would look to continue doing those type of sessions with families, also incorporating our community-based partners to assist in those learning sessions. So we would continue to do that. Right now, I know virtually CBOs are working with FCSSPs, so on and so forth, to ensure that families are receiving that support. So that's the only thing that I would add. So thank you, Superintendent.
Thank you, ladies. We have a question about creativity and innovation. I think it's pretty cool. The question is, we have relied heavily on creative and innovative thinking through the pandemic. What are we doing to encourage and exemplify the creative thinking through the arts, dance, and physical movement? It's essential in building the whole student.
Yes, could not agree more. And that is actually an area that we continue to hear a lot about especially in the survey. And we are actually thinking about, setting resources aside for the enrichment piece. It's going to start, for example, this summer, and then it's going to carry over. I am proud to say that our Board of Education has made investments already in the budget that they already approved in February. There were investments already made to add additional enrichment supports at the middle school level and even at the elementary level, and obviously at the high school level as well. But this is an opportunity that we have through partnerships. For example, Chief Blackburk and I just had a conversation just yesterday with the Hartford Stage, and how it is that they want to partner with our schools, and offering not only opportunities throughout the day in our schools, but also in the afternoons. And so I agree with you. That's around the arts, but there's also the other innovation piece, and I don't know that that's what whoever raised the question. There's a lot of opportunity to innovate around technology, instructional technology as well. So we are very early in all of this, and it will allow, some of these resources will allow for opportunities for our teachers and our staff to actually innovate. We are thinking of having a innovation, what we call a small innovation fund, so that schools or teachers can apply for smaller mini grants, but to do exactly what this person is referring to as how do we innovate and get creative to meet the whole student need.
Thank you. And speaking of whole student needs, there is it's a two-part question again, and it has a little bit of background. Due to the pandemic situation this school year, most of the students remain virtual even now. Being virtual definitely had an impact on the students' progress, not so on academic basis, but socially, especially the kiddos in K and lower grades. This is the age they learn to interact and develop social behaviors and emotions. The first question is, do we have any plans to catch up when they hopefully return to school next year? And the second question is, in your opinion, what will that have an impact in the overall district goals set up for 2024?
That is a great question, and hoping that we're going to capture it so that I can also reflect on that with my team. We do have a lot of catching up to do, and I will say that some of the things that we're thinking about right now, and no decisions have been made. These are conversations that we have daily. We know that we're going to have to invest, for example, in what we call a system of supports, tiered systems of supports. That means that there's going to be additional resources that all students are going to have access to. Example, additional social workers, mentors. But we also know that some students are going to need a little more. And so that might look like having tutors for students. We know that, we have to offer extended day or extended year opportunities. And even if we can't extend at the moment the length of the school day for everyone, we can offer that for some students. And so making sure that there are opportunities for students after school, in the evenings, the weekends, if families want to take advantage of that. We also know that our teachers, our staff need support. And so, investing in additional coaches for our schools, right? Literacy coaches, math coaches. And one thing that we want to also think about is how do we have teacher opportunities for teacher leadership. In addition to having teachers work and lead with their colleagues, we have an opportunity to say, well, is there an opportunity to have teacher leads in some of our schools or across all of our schools? We know that there are teachers that are deeply, either experienced and they want to show their craft, and others could learn from them. And so those are additional opportunities that we're gonna see how we can, implement next year. And it gets to the question on all of this is to accelerate student loss, learning loss, or the gaps. Now, the other thing that I'll say is these, for example, we have the funds that we're going to have access to prioritize learning loss. And so we know that we have 2 years to implement some of these changes. And we have to be careful that we don't say, so let's add, all these coaches or all these tutors, and then 2 years from now, we have to, do away with that because we ran out of the funding or the funding ran out. So it's a little tricky for us, but it's a great question because we know that the investments have to happen urgently in the next couple of years. I hope I answered that question. Wait, there was a great, the follow-up was about how does this impact the goal setting? And yes. I appreciate that question because we continue to reflect on how that might shift, because we know we haven't yet assessed all of our students, certainly not with the SBAC. And so we have quarterly assessments. We have our iReady, which is, what we're using, for example, to measure literacy. But, some of our students took the tests at home, others took in school, some didn't take it at all. And so we know that we still have to do some assessments, either toward the end of this year or the beginning of next year, which might have to shift our goal. So that was an excellent question, because these goals might have to be fluid depending on how deep that level of need is.
All right, and we have 2 more questions that are not necessarily directly related to our presentation today, but one of them is actually for Kate. Somebody wants to know if PeerDeck is available as an app. I'm glad they enjoyed it so much to ask, because I love PeerDeck too. So
it is not an app, but it is. You can join through it through any web browser, so that's why we suggested joining through your phone. But it is a really great product, and we teachers around, again, all across the country have been using it, including at Hartford.
Thank you, Kate. And the other question is related to the board meetings. How can families either join them or watch them? What's the process for them to get access to them?
So we certainly have, we record, those are live meetings. And so we can certainly send the information out to our families as well. We are, as the guidance from the state continues to shift, we are going to continue to make those shifts for the board meetings. We already have public comment at our board, but if it's that folks don't know how to, access the live meetings, we can send those out. And we can also send the information about accessing the agenda as well.
Thank you. That's all the questions that we have for now. If there's any more questions, please either call the Welcome Center, contact one of us, and we'll try to get that answered for you.
Yes, just to remind everyone that, any and all questions that you have, or comments or reactions, reflections to, the information or the discussion, please do share either through Welcome Center or through the Office of Family and Community Engagement. And I want to remind us that, the strategic operating plan is work that we were going to do last summer, and we were getting ready to start to do that work in the spring, and COVID happened, and we had to completely put everything aside so that we can tend to the crisis that was in front of us. And here we are, right, a year later, and so we are trying to do engagement during this difficult time still. And also using the information to help inform some of the applications that we have for the relief funding. So the first application that we're working on is actually due on the 19th. We know that we're not going to have all of the details for that yet, and that just because we submit an application, we don't know if it's going to be approved. So this is a work in progress, but the strategic operating plan is also connected to the budget, for example, that our Board of Education already approved. And so there's a lot of great work that has already been happening, and we want to continue to build on that work, but we want to be, smart about the opportunity that we have with this short-term funding that we have. And so please know that we appreciate you for joining and, learning about the overview, the 3-year plan. We value your feedback, and we'll be using that over the next few weeks to inform the revision of our 3-year plan. Know that I'm grateful for your partnership, support, and commitment. And I know that this is a hard time for all of us, and I appreciate the partnership. None of us knew that this is what we were going to be called to do. And so as challenging as it is for all of us, know that I am proud to be, your superintendent and to be doing it alongside of all of you. So thank you.